Good afternoon. Welcome to the Business Podcast. So I'm jointly speaking today. I'm not just hosting. We're doing this as a double act. Nigel and Nikki double act today. So hi, Nigel. Welcome.
Hi, Nikki. Hi, everyone.
So today we're going to be talking about shortlister heads of terms, and I'll talk a bit more in detail what that actually means shortly. But firstly, I want Nigel to set the scene because Nigel's been working in M&A for a long period of time. I don't want to embarrass him by how long.
Too long.
But he's got a really good feel of marketplace, and I think it's important to understand what the marketplace is currently like. So over to Nigel so he can tell you what's going on at the moment.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Nikki. At the moment, I have to say, we've probably just come through two of our, and certainly personally, my busiest months ever with taking a number of deals to heads of terms. But it's also the amount of inquiries that we're getting per engagement that is impressive. And I've got to say, one of the deals is probably the quickest we've ever from engagement and got to heads of terms within 6 weeks. So we're not talking about any sort of stress situations and anything like that when insolvency guys. These are highly
Really profitable businesses.
Profitable companies are very desirable, and within the certain sectors and marketplace, and it is obviously dependent on that. Some of the processes can be very swift. So it is active. There's a lot of buyers out there. So typically for each of our engagements, probably this year, we're getting 40 to 50 inquiries per engagement, and that's that's
It's a
backed one,
hotline, isn't it, Nigel?
and when it's busy, it's exceptionally busy. So well done team as well. So that's good. But 40 to 50 inquiries. Of those, there is a lot of private equity, which for some of the ones that we're marketing isn't particularly suitable. But there's certainly a lot of trade buyers or related buyers looking to sort of increase their sales book and as they're scaling their business. And typically we would narrow that down in the main to about a short list of maybe 4 or 5. And it's at that point, I think, we're now going to take the discussion and say what's involved and really how to get that deal moved, from heads of terms and the criteria involved in making a deal work, I suppose, Nikki, isn't it?
Absolutely. So yes, so just in case anyone is watching for the first time and they haven't come across this before, Nigel and I run a business together, Succession Planning, which is fairly new business, but we've both worked in M&A in different forms for many years. Nigel in the actual brokerage, I in the advisory and due diligence, but advising buyers and sellers for SMEs. We're looking very much in the SME space here. So what we wanted to do today was give SME owners a real glimpse into what really happens during the process, because for many entrepreneurs, this may be their only sale that they do. You sell a house perhaps multiple times during your lifetime, but often you may only build one business and then sell it. So, it's all new, and it's really important for the owner to understand what actually happens in the process, learn from people that do it every day, so that they can make this process as good as possible. So the part of the process we're talking about today is you've already had all the phone calls, we've already sifted through them, we've already had probably hundreds of conversations, because a lot of them, need multiple conversations. So you might have had 50 inquiries, but talked to all of them at least 2, if not 3 times. From that, we get a sense of the potential buyers. So from that, we are talking today about the shortlist. So our team will look and qualify those buyers, and we'll come up with a really good shortlist for the sellers, because the sellers are typically still running their business day to day. They haven't got time to go into 50 different meetings. So what we're trying to do is, from experience and from what the seller has said of their requirements for selling, is choosing a really good shortlist of, it varies. Sometimes it might be 5, it might even be up to 10. It depends on the availability of the of the seller. But to make sure that we have really good qualified buyers in front of them, and then make that process really streamlined and efficient. In the ideal scenario, a couple of weeks. Sometimes bigger deals takes longer, because it's much slower process. But for the typical £1 to £2 million SME sale, this is where we can really do this all 6 weeks done. So Nigel will obviously say it depends what sector.
I always say sector dependent, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about from that short list that we give to the buyer, and we will hold your hand through those meetings, through to the point where heads of terms are signed. So that's what we're talking today about, making sure that part of the process is using the best use of everybody's time. So the bit that Nigel's going to now is over to Nigel, and you're going to talk about communication information flow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, and I think just to reiterate on a couple of points, because what I would say, a little plug for ourselves. I mean, a lot of Nikki and I have worked together for some time, but also in a lot of deals over the years, that financial expertise and accounting knowledge and tax expertise needed to be brought to the table. Everybody's got their own advisors, but it's for the whole deal, and so people know where they stand. That's an integral part of the mix, as is the bit that the sort of, so Gorringe accountants brought that bit to the table, and the business board have brought the bit of then the sort of the marketing, and strong with really not just advertising on the platforms, but direct marketing, direct messaging to people to get to those inquiries. So the reason I sort of re-mention that is because the communication and the flow of communication and the regularity of it, and the information that accountants and certainly Gorringe can help put together is invaluable within a deal flow. And so you need both, because obviously one, it's initially as we present the marketing information, that all needs to be there, so we'd have that, but we need, as a deal normally would probably be maybe a 3-month process of inquiries and questions. Unfortunately, they're not all done and dusted within 6 weeks. But so to have management information, to have client information, to have a breakdown of client profile, not names, but just the structure of what sector they're in, longevity of relationships, those type of things help cement and help give a buyer confidence. So with quick communication and information, it's all about instilling confidence in the buyer. And the quicker we do that, and in fairness, the quicker we can be supplied the information from the seller, that just helps the process of the whole deal flow move very swiftly. And also it shows, as a seller, you've got great record keeping if we can get the information so it's instant. So that, if that's
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, regardless of what broker or corporate finance team you use, or accountant, whoever you're using, as the seller, you can really help the process by getting really good information, making sure it's up to date before you go into the deal process, and making sure you communicate really well with the broker and everything, because the buyers, yes, they want to buy you, but they will only have so much patience, etc. So you need to have as good communication as you can. Fair enough, if you're going away, that's fine, just tell everyone, yeah, in this process I'm going to be away 2 weeks or whatever. That's not a problem, as long as people know. But if you want to keep the deal on track.
No, exactly right. Have you frozen there, Nikki, or have I? I don't know if the whole thing's frozen. I'll carry on talking. I don't know if it's going to pick up, but I think just going back on what Nikki was saying there, I'm just going to sort of going back on what Nikki was saying. Yeah, it's completely frozen. I'll just ask a colleague if they could just ring Nick, see if it's live. So unfortunately, I can't tell if it's live, so I can carry on talking if I am live. So no problem at all. And what I'll refer to is actually sorry, I've just had the thumbs up. So sincere apologies for what's happened there. But basically, going back to the sort of buyers, I think the communication and the information is imperative. But then going down to another level, it's actually really where it's having honest conversations with those buyers, and all through the process, we're qualifying those buyers. And if we don't think a deal is suitable for them, we'll say so. There's no point in having people in the shortlist who, quite honestly, are then going to probably dip out at the 11th hour. So we'd always try and qualify them throughout. And literally yesterday, I was just probably saying to somebody, in fairness, isn't this particular engagement or company, isn't it too far for you? Because you will, it is a small business, you will have to be there. We can't just sort of park it up and put a manager in. Unfortunately, small businesses in the main do need driving. In certain situations, people are very lucky and they can have a sort of a tier of management, but generally as they're being bought, they sort of really need to be all over the business so they totally understand it. But that's part of that sort of shortlist and qualification process. So that's sort of how that works. So you're back with us,
Sorry,
Nikki.
Nigel. It's the blooming village. You got out of the village at the right time.
Yeah,
power cuts in
absolutely.
the middle. We're going to have to get a generator to have these problems. This is a test for what's to come in 2023, I think. Sorry. Where have you got to, Nigel?
So to be honest, what I actually was just talking about was the qualification of buyers within that shortlist, and we don't want somebody sort of dipping out on the 11th hour. So that qualification process is sort of equally as important, and having honest conversations with buyers. And I was only saying to somebody yesterday, I was just saying to everybody that you've got to say, if they're too far away and it's not practical, I think you've got to say that, or you've got to say, can you really afford this, or is this company a bit too big? Wouldn't a smaller one be better? And I think as much as we want buyers and to get people to put forward offers, they've got to be able to sort of, it's really after the deal, they've got to be able to perform, it's got to work for all parties.
To be real. There's no point having tire kickers or people that are just dreaming about it. It needs to be proper qualified buyers that have got an acquisition strategy. and
Yeah,
funding behind them. Absolutely. So should I go into my bit, the culture part?
Yeah, do that.
Absolutely.
I didn't
Quick,
dare go into
get
that.
in before, just in case it goes again. You're then talking about sensitivity and deal momentum. So
Okay.
I'm going to talk about culture. So these are three different areas, but I go. So all the meetings that I go into buyers, I focus the whole time on this. When you're first meeting the buyer and the seller, is so important. Yes, the numbers are important, but they wouldn't be at the table if the numbers weren't in the right ballpark. So this is where I think I put it on my blog. 70 to 90% of acquisitions after completion actually fail. And this is where we don't want that to happen. We want to do whatever we can to make sure there's almost like a dating matching. You want to have the right match together so that when the acquisition happens, it is a successful acquisition. Because we want, we don't, the sellers, yes, they'll have their money, but they don't want to know that their business has died a death and has disappeared, or the clients are all unhappy or the employees happy. So we've got to get it right. So what we're looking here, firstly, is the culture. So those are the things about the business. So it might be their different ways they run their organization. It might be things about their ethos. What are their aspirations? So, for example, I've been I'm working on some different accountancy practice deals at the moment. If you've got a practice that is being sold, they're all super happy being hybrid, but then you have a buyer come in, but they insist upon 100% of the time in the office, that culture is just going to clash. It's not going to work. So that's a very basic part of it. There's so many other things, but that is an example of the thing. So it could be about how they treat their clients. It could be how they treat the employees, all sorts of different things of their culture, and you want to get those matching. The synergies, that's more where we're talking about the industry. So we typically are looking at trade sales. However, sometimes it's quite wide, and sometimes we're actually looking at, rather than a vertical, it could be a vertical acquisition or a horizontal acquisition. So it's not always a big fish buying a little fish. Sometimes they're buying another business to expand their portfolio diversity, for example. But again, it's still understanding there are still some synergies between their businesses. So, for example, it could be, we all know that there's been huge supply problems in some particular sectors. So some businesses may go and think, well, actually, let's cut out the middleman. Let's buy my suppliers so that I'm not going to have that delay to my clients. So it's looking at those sorts of synergies and looking at how is that going to benefit the company by bringing those two things together. There could be economies of scales. There could be improvements for client, what they actually get in the end, all sorts of different things. Then you've got the personalities. Now, this is something that you can only get by the meeting. Now, I know that a lot of people will say meet in person, and yeah, meeting in person is good too, but you can learn so much on those simple Teams or Zoom calls. So you know that when you interview a staff member, yes, you are looking for capability, expertise, technical ability, etc. But there's still a certain element of personality that needs to match as well. If you think about the typical deal as going to be 2 years until completion, you've got to think, do I want to work with this team for 2 years? Am I going to get on with them? You may say, well, the check's big enough, I'll put up with anything. But ultimately, you want to be enjoying those 2 years. So, for example, I looked at a smaller accountancy practice of mine. So I've got another business that's an accountancy practice. So I was looking at a smaller business a few years ago and visited them. I just could not imagine that particular managing partner. There wasn't a horrible person or anything. He was just too different. I couldn't imagine doing a handover and working with that person. Whereas obviously Nigel, he puts up with me, so it's fine. So, but you've got to have that. So if there's big personality clashes, unless you enjoy arguing and falling out, it's better to have that personality that fits in. So then we're going into over to Nigel on
just a little bit, just to sort of add in there with the what we sort of call the ingredients of a deal. You know, the people involved, the culture of the business, and the synergies. And I think where a company or a buyer is basically a bigger player, 4 or 5 times the size, and it's a very similar business, that's a lot more straightforward. You have the same commercial issues, you know, the same software products, you have the same sort of targets and probably workflow systems and things like that. So there'll be a lot of synergies. Where some of the sort of focus has to be more magnified is when there's a little bit more diversification and a business sort of overlaps into a slightly different arena. So, for example, somebody may have been doing consultancy within a certain sector, but if they're then starting to sort of do some supply or maybe have some products or integrated products into their service, something like that can be a totally different mindset of personalities, totally different sort of ways of working and everything. So it's more where there's diversification or horizontal or vertical integration that they're the sort of, to us, are the slightly ones where we sort of ensure that things work. So yeah, swiftly moving on to sensitivity and deal momentum.
yeah.
Both and all the aspects we're talking about is actually down and helps the momentum of a deal. And that's paramount throughout, be it the communication, be it the information, be it the personalities and communicating quickly back. And that is what makes a deal work. At Heads, we would try and timetable as much as we can where the due diligence is, what's required, how long it's going to take, when the different stages of the sort of process will come in, and timetable that. So it's really, the deal momentum is basically imperative to any deal. And we all know when we're selling something, or if things slow down, then there's normally some sort of obstacle that probably hasn't risen itself to the surface. So it's paramount, deal momentum, to keep that sort of going throughout. And typically from sort of, we're talking shortlist ahead. I mean, that can be a week, that can be a month, and it, again, as my favourite saying, it is sector dependent and buyer dependent, really. So the momentum's imperative, but what the main obvious ingredient of a deal is the business, and the business needs to carry on running in the same way, or hopefully improving throughout the whole process of it being marketed, without any effect to the owners. So they're getting on with their day-to-day job, they're focusing on the figures, they're keeping the team motivated. And as a consequence of that, the company has a lot of information that is sensitive to them. That might be their customers, that might be intellectual property, that might be ways of working. And it's imperative that that is held under wraps for as long as possible, and actually often till after completion. So, in competitive industries, and again, sector dependent, sorry, it's so sensitive that you don't want to release it because it actually could jeopardize the sort of the future success of the business if some of this information got into the wrong hands. So the sensitivity of information is paramount, and I think backing that up a little bit is also the sensitivity of the process, which means that for as long as possible, it's only the sort of the stakeholders in the business that should really know about what's happening until a deal's done or as close to as deal's done. And we've had it this year a number of times where we've had unfortunately information, an owner may have wanted to tell an employee or something like that, and it's the problem is all that employee is going to do is worry, really. And so and about the change. So if we go back to what you're actually selling, it's the business, and it's to keep the business on track and on an upward trajectory, so that basically you're maximizing what you get for your business. And so all of those little aspects are sort of red flags to us. So sensitivity is a massively important part of the deal, and it's just maintaining that throughout, which at times is challenging. And I appreciate for owners, and I've been there, it is challenging that you can't tell anybody. So but it is imperative within the deals.
Absolutely. So we've only got a few minutes left, so apologies if I do slightly overrun. But there's a couple areas I want to go through. First is on how do you decide before exclusivity. So what we're actually saying there is, so you've had all your meetings with the potential buyers, they've put through your offers forward. So what you're trying to do there is, between those offers, decide which one you're going forward with before you go to exclusivity. So what I would, so let me talk through one that I've done recently. They haven't actually gone to heads of terms yet, but we've just been there's been so much interest in this particular business. We've really had to streamline down the list because it was just trying to balance the running of the business for the person and to have time, really to focus on that short list and get it shorter, really. So what we were doing there was, now, usually, well, not usually, in this particular instance, it's very transparent how the sector values that particular business. So what we're doing, so the actual numerical offers are pretty similar. So in fact, that situation is you're not necessarily choosing between the ultimate pound offer. So in that scenario, what we really were looking at is we're talking through with our client and talking through various different things. One, what did she think was the best fit for her clients? What was the best fit for employees? What was the best fit for her so that she spends the next 2 years in that business, whether that works out as being the right one for her? What is the payment profile? Because that's a key thing as well. Sometimes it's not always about the actual total amount, it's how much money is paid on day one. Because some sellers do think about, anything later is a bonus, because especially if there's clawbacks, they think about what the day one payment is, and also what her remuneration is during the earnout. So with that, we're basically just at a table, just ranking through all those things. It's like doing one of those pros and cons lists almost, but ranking through, talking it through. If there's any area that she wasn't comfortable in, it was going back to the buyer, getting more information, potentially even setting up additional meetings to clarify things, but just really talking, just being available to talk through all the little quibbles, so that you need to make sure that your seller, who we're representing, is absolutely happy on the buyer that they end up deciding. So that's where we really, we need to listen. What does the seller want? So we really need to listen lots in there, and then advise and make sure they have as much information as possible, so because it's the seller's decision of who they go with. All we can do is make sure that we've given as much information, and also where we have got a very competitive situation, we will go back to the potential buyers and say, actually, you're their favourite, but this one is doing it slightly differently. Can you adjust it? And we're not being sharks. We're trying to get the right thing for the buyer, and the right thing for the seller, I mean. But the buyer still needs to make sure that the business goes through. So that's where we do spend a lot of time, and from that period also is you're doing that at the same time sometimes as fashioning the heads of terms. But what happens next is, once you've decided on your exclusivity, that's when you start really talking about heads of terms. It's all those things that you've talked about in the offer process, but putting them into a legal type jargon format. Try to do plain English, because you don't want to get loads of arguments and worrying about it being confusing. But that's what you're trying to do. So the heads of terms process, actually, I would say, normally is not, if everybody's been communicating really well, that heads of terms process can be actually very smooth. Where I see it being a problem, where I have seen it be an issue, is where that communication hasn't happened. So that's where I've been perhaps just on the due diligence side and not doing the brokering, and there hasn't been the right communication, and so there's a lot of back and forth when you get heads of terms, because they're like, well, I don't remember agreeing to that. So again, it's just really making sure you get, and I think this goes back almost full circle to what Nigel said nearly right at the beginning about that's when you really do need to get everybody around the table together. What are you trying to achieve? Making sure those heads of terms reflect it, so that you can then go into your exclusivity. Nigel, is there anything to add on?
No, I think certainly you covered the elements there. I think that there's bits we sort of touched on, and I think all the way through the process, those different things that we've spoken about come in, and it's not start with one and then move on to another stage. It's a constant all the way along, ensuring the sensitivity, keeping the momentum, keeping the communication, building up the case of what goes into the heads of terms, putting those bits and pieces as people have would structure the deal together, and then just making sure we qualify between us all the right buyers, and there's and that we say we get 40-50 inquiries. Equally, we could probably certainly, the maybe half who haven't bought businesses before, who are maybe in private equity, who just do have a look at a lot of engagement. So it's our job to sift through these. So that's what then gets together a well qualified shortlist. And again, we're doing that from the outset. So we're probably having honest conversations with people week 1 or week 2 and saying, actually, you live 100 miles away from this business. Is it really practical for you? Because on a day-to-day basis, how well can you manage it? Yeah, fair comment. And there's no point us all carrying on, so it's that constant qualifying as well all the way through. So I say with all of them, it's right through the deal that they're the aspects and the ingredients that we'd sort of look for to get a successful outcome.
Absolutely. So we're over time, so I'm just going to briefly wrap up. I'll just say that this can, there's a lot to take on board. It can become quite overwhelming for the seller. So I would recommend that the seller does make sure that they have trusted advisors that they can talk about, whether it's their accountant, their lawyer, their business partner, their lovely broker, whoever it is. Make sure that you've got people that you're happy to have honest, real conversations with, so that you feel comfortable with what your decision is and where you're going. So that's it for today. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry that I had to, I just disappeared, and I was like, please come back. It was only off for a couple of seconds, but it was waiting for the router to come back up, which is a pain. So thank you very much. Next week I'm sure it's a social media one with the lovely Susan again. I think we're talking very specifically on Instagram next week. But thank you very much to everybody. Any questions you have, even if you're not thinking about selling now, if you're thinking about selling, in a few years, there's never too early to start prepping. So please do contact myself or Nigel. And we're always happy to have a chat, aren't we, Nigel?
Absolutely.
But have a lovely weekend. Enjoy the chocolate trick or treating, everyone. And cheerio.
Cheers. Bye then.